Today we're going to talk about creating drama in our painting by increasing the contrast, using more dark light value contrast as well as temperature contrast. And this painting by Hanson Puthoff, what sets off this mountain, this strong sunlit mountain, is the dark cast shadow, I guess, from a cloud or from another larger mountain outside of the picture plane. But it creates instant drama. If there was light here on this tree as well as on the ground here, and as well as in the background and in the sky, it wouldn't have nearly the contrast. And it really sets up an instant contrast that makes the viewer right away notice the mountain. Whereas if everything is sunlit, nothing really stands out. So these big cast shadows create instant contrast and draw your eye to the light area even more. So the image we're using today this is in the Bighorn Mountains, and you can see the cast shadow from the clouds on the back mountains and in the foreground. It's a little more subtle in the foreground, but I still want to use it. And the cast shadow over in here also from the clouds. So first thing I want to do is kind of zoom in because it's way too big, way too much foreground. My interest is right in here. So if I can zoom into that, I'm going to eliminate a lot of stuff I just don't need. I can kind of decide on the shape or maybe what shape would work best for what I'm looking at. Alright, there's my composition. Again, I've got that dark shadow pattern back in here and the dark cast shadow here. So the minute I can increase that, I'm just going to stay with basic colors of the light and dark here and just increase it. And in my drawing or in my composing, really decide light areas and dark areas. In the photograph, there's kind of in between. It looks like a lot of halftone. But if I paint a lot of halftone here, then it's going to get lost. But if I can see the foreground, pull it together and push that contrast more, right away these lights stick out a bit more. And I can go with a few dark accents to even increase that a bit more underneath trees, some shrubbery. Then I want to go ahead and do that also to the background mountains. So if I can see, increase the contrast here, and that this is a cloud shadow, so the edges can be fairly soft, and that's right in here where the cast shadow meets the sunlight. It can gradually turn to light because the cloud is so far away, the edges are a little softer. But right away, that pops that a lot more. Now the sunlit area looks even brighter. And if I go in and push the sunlit area stronger yet, decide what colors I want on these trees. Again, the photograph doesn't always dictate what colors I use. Now this is a little bit light maybe for the trees, but I can always darken them slightly. The flat ground has to be lighter yet, and for the sake of color, I might go with more of a orange in here. So a little variety of sunlit color. We'll go from July to fall here. And then for the flat plane, I'm a little high key, a little high value, I guess, on the lights. Trees can be slightly darker and the ground slightly darker, but now it shows more instant contrast between those darks and lights, which creates a lot more drama in the painting. And then compositionally, I can lift this up a little bit more just to create more contrast in there. Even this mountain here could be lifted up a little bit more if I want to cut down on the shape of the sky. But the point is pushing the values to really create more drama. And those cloud shadows or shadows from mountains that are out of the picture plane that just fall across the foreground really increases the drama quite a bit. Now I do have the mountains here and the flat plane here the same value. I wouldn't do that in the painting. They have to be different values or else it kind of flattens out. But I'm setting up here that strong contrast of dark and light. Now looking at a couple of other images, let's start with this one here. Decide what I want to use here. This is Teton Mountains, a lot of cloud shadows on the mountains here, on the hills, and in the foreground. So a lot of drama. When I have big billowy clouds like this that are kind of rolling across the sky, it's a good time to go out and photograph because you do get cloud shadows like this. So I'll crop this. Now I have a little bit more interesting composition. The mountaintop is a little bit too much same height, so I'd want to change that. But I could do a lot of things here, starting with the light areas. These are aspens here. I could lift them up. I could create shapes here a little bit higher, pull a few more out, and then go ahead and concentrate on where and how much of those darks do I want to put in. And the darks in the photograph are pretty dark. I can use that now to really find that definite shape. And I can have some subtle value changes, but it has to read first as real definite. That just increases the contrast. Pulling it together, getting rid of some of the halftone. There's some halftone in there, but early on, if I can have a simple dark and a simple light and no halftone, then as I block that in, I can come back and add a little bit of halftone where I want. But just copying the photograph, like in here, probably wouldn't have that in the composition. It's too far over to the right, but too much halftone in there. If I see that as a shadow, I want it to be a shadow. I can come back and get a little bit lighter in a spot or two inside there, but if it reads as a shadow, it's going to have more drama, more contrast. Same thing with these upright trees. Don't hesitate to create that vertical dark in the trees that makes them stand up, and again creates more contrast. Same thing with the shadow down here. Also, the idea of pushing temperature. I can get these a little cooler, equivalent to block it in this color. I can come back with a little bit of blue and just lightly cool it off, as long as it's still wet. It's still the same color, still has that kind of orange and green dark, but the blue kind of cools it off. But you can always push the temperature. Pushing the temperature here in the sunlight and push it in the shadows back there. And that goes a long way again to making more drama, more contrast. Same thing in the mountains back in here. I want to not see too much of that kind of half-tone dark that's in there. I want to pull that together just a little bit. I might go a bit darker because I really want this to read as a solid dark shape first. Cooler and more on the blue side than the foreground shadows. That really makes a pop. Then I can come back, get a hair darker in some areas and maybe a touch lighter, but everything has to stay within that shadow. When we look at the photograph, we tend to see way too much halftone. Too many lighter darks inside that kind of kill that contrast. So push the values a little stronger and push the temperature to get that warm and cool contrast as well.